Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur, and I've been reading William Faulkner's The Sound of Fury. I'm absolutely loving it. This is one of my favorite books, and now I get to reread it with a bunch of great booktubers for Faulkner in August, and we're having fantastic conversations. They're posting outstanding videos, which I'll link to below in the description box. This week we're finishing up section 2, which focuses on Quentin Compson, and I've got my shirt that most closely approximates honeysuckle, although after reading this I don't know that I want to be associated with honeysuckle. I just want to make a couple of quick notes on what I found in this reread, and then there's a particular question that comes up for a lot of first-time readers of The Sound and the Fury, which deals with Quentin's relationship with his sister Caddy Compson. And I think that within the text there's, to me at least, clear evidence of an answer to that question, and I'm just going to share that. So we start, of course, with Quentin recalling his father's brilliant speech about the watch. I give you the mausoleum of all hope and desire. Week start. I give it to you not that you may remember time, but that you may forget it now and then for a moment and not spend all your breath trying to conquer it, which feels nice. And then he goes on, because no battle is ever won, he said, they are not even fought. The field only reveals to man his own folly and despair, and victory is an illusion of philosophers and fools. Well, that was inspiring. That was up there with Shakespeare's Richard III before Bosworth Field in terms of speeches that I want to go into battle behind. And that recalling that speech sets the tone for Quentin. He's going to be obsessed with time. He breaks his watch, I think, in an attempt to free himself from time in the past, and instead really becomes stuck in time and stuck in the past. And then he goes on, in the second paragraph, it ends with, that said, little sister death that never had a sister. And those are the two themes that run through Quentin's mind this entire day. His sister Caddy and death, his own approaching death. And so the question with his sister comes up, and it's a question that I think every reader has, is does he actually commit incest with Caddy? Does Caddy commit incest with Quentin? And I think the answer is no. There are people who ask, is Quentin in love with Caddy? Is Caddy in love with Quentin? And I think those are questions that can be explored. It's an obsessive, probably unhealthy love, but I don't think that there's actually any physical incest in it. And I think there's a couple of places in the text where we see this. So early on, Caddy's fiance and later husband, Herbert, derides Quentin as a half-baked Galahad of a brother. Galahad is famously a chaste knight. That second paragraph, instead, right before it says little sister death, it's good St. Francis that said little sister death, that never had a sister. And so again, we have there early on two sort of totems of representing chastity that I think Quentin is associated with, that he is chaste. He's mocked by his friends for not going out and dating girls or even, casually sleeping with girls. He despises his friend Gerald, whose mother basically cheers Gerald on in these endeavors. And so I think those quick allusions point to the idea that Quentin ends up being chaste. But there's also the fairly disturbing scene with his sister where he goes and holds a knife to her throat and basically says, I'm willing to kill you and then kill myself, and we sort of die together. But within that frame of dialogue, that Quentin is remembering himself, and he's an unreliable narrator, but there are some overtones to it. So I held the point of the knife at her throat. It won't take but a second, just a second. And it goes on, it won't take but a second. I'll try not to hurt. All right. Will you close your eyes? No, like this. You'll have to push it harder. Touch your hand to it. And it goes on. Push it. Are you going to? Do you want me to? Yes, push it. Touch your hand to it. Now he's talking about the knife. But I think there's this element of sexuality to that. And it goes on. Her muscles gathered. I sat up. It's my knife. I dropped it. And I think that's the point at which it becomes clear that Quentin does not ever really commit incest with his sister. On another page, he's talking about how he's sort of, when he's talking to some boys about what they would do with a $25 reward if they caught this big trout. And he says, they talked all at once, their voices insistent and contradictory and impatient, making of unreality a possibility, then a probability, then an incontrovertible fact, as people will when their desires become words. And that happens less than about halfway through Quentin's section, and then towards the end, of course, he claims to have committed incest. So again, as people will when their desires become words, he takes an unreality and he tries to make it a possibility. Then he makes it a probability. Then he makes it to himself an incontrovertible fact, as people will when their desires become words. And I don't think there is actually any physical incest between Quentin and Catty Compson. That's just, again, my opinion. However, there's an interesting concept so that's the question. Now some quick notes. One is the idea of Quentin says to Catty, "Only you and me then, amid the pointing and the horror, walled by the clean flame." And the flame is this interesting concept because that's something that Benji associates with his hand in the fire. And I think that's an important thing for the Compsons, that Quentin sort of wants to be with his sister in any capacity he can. And ultimately the only capacity he can conceive of that being is like if they're somehow condemned to hell together. And in reality, his life may feel like a hell. But there's another aspect to Quentin that I found on this reread that I thought was interesting, and it has to do with Quentin as sort of being this like tragic parody of the knight errant or the knight on a quest, his quest to recoup his family honor, to save Catty, and how he fails at all of those. And so he's referred to again as Galahad, a knight. And there's this aspect of the Compsons that Faulkner points out in the Compsons Appendix, which was published in The Portable Faulkner, where historically the Compsons always fight on the losing side. They fight in the 1715 and 1745 rebellions with the Stuart pretenders and lose. They fight on the English side during the American Revolution. One of them tries to join Wilkinson's conspiracy. They obviously fight on the South during the Civil War. And so repeatedly they fight on the losing side. And I think Faulkner questions whether some of those are causes, they not only fought and lost, but sometimes they were fighting on the wrong side. And Quentin seems to be engaging in this. He wants to duel Dalton Ames, and that's a disaster. And he repeatedly fails along this quest. And so that's just another sort of note I had. That's really all I have for this. Again, I find this section very challenging but very fascinating, and I am not really looking forward to dipping farther into Jason Compson because I abhor the character. But I do love this book, so I'm going to press forward. Thanks, everyone.